I'm not the superstitious type. I've been driving long haul for 6 years now, covering routes from Texas to Montana and everything in between. I'm 32 years old and trucking is all I know. I dropped out of college at 20, got my CDL, and never looked back. The road is lonely, sure, but it's honest work. Most nights I sleep in the cab, parked at rest stops or truck plazas, listening to classic rock on satellite radio. My biggest worries are usually bad weather, traffic jams, and keeping my fuel costs down. Last month I picked up a load in Amarillo headed for Billings. Standard run, nothing fancy. I'd driven that stretch dozens of times, but somewhere along Highway 87 in Wyoming, something happened that I still can't explain, and I don't think I ever will. I left Amarillo on a Thursday afternoon around 3. The load was machine parts, nothing fragile, just heavy. My rig is a Kenworth T680 dark blue, reliable as they come. I've put over 400,000 miles on her. The route would take about 15 hours with breaks, so I planned to stop overnight at a rest area near Casper. Traffic was light, weather was clear, and I had a full tank. Everything felt routine. I checked in with dispatch around 6, let them know I was making good time. They told me to stay safe and keep them posted. I grabbed dinner at a Pilot in Cheyenne, a burger and fries, nothing special. By 8, I was back on the road, cruising north on 87. The sun had set and the highway was empty. Just me, the hum of the engine, and the occasional set of headlights heading south. Around 9:30, my CB radio crackled to life. I keep it on channel 19, the trucker channel. Most of the time it's quiet up in Wyoming, not a lot of chatter. But that night I heard a voice. A man's voice, low and calm. He said, "Southbound Kenworth, you got your ears on." I glanced in my mirrors. There were no trucks behind me, no headlights at all. I picked up the mic and replied, "This is northbound Kenworth, go ahead." There was a pause, then the voice came back. "You're headed north on 87, right? Blue rig." My stomach tight. I looked around again, still nothing behind me, nothing ahead except darkness and the white lines of the road. I said, "Yeah, that's me. Who's asking?" Another pause. Then he said, "Just checking. You might want to watch your speed. Road gets tricky up ahead." I thanked him and hung the mic back up. My speed was fine. I was doing 65 in a 70 zone, but something about the conversation felt off. How did he know what color my truck was? How did he know I was northbound when he couldn't see me? I tried to shake it off. Maybe he'd passed me earlier and remembered my rig. Truckers notice things like that. I turned up the radio and kept driving. Around 10, the voice came back. "Blue Kenworth, you still there?" I hesitated, then picked up the mic. "Yeah, I'm here. What do you need?" he said. "Just wanted to make sure you're staying alert. Long stretch ahead. No lights, no gas stations for 40 miles. I knew that already. I'd driven this route plenty of times. I said, "I appreciate it, but I'm good." He didn't respond right away. Then he said, "You got anyone riding with you?" That question hit me wrong. I felt a chill run down my back. I said, "No, I'm solo." "Why?" he said, "Just curious. Gets lonely out here, doesn't it?" I didn't answer. I hung up the mic and turned the CB volume down. My hands were gripping the wheel tighter now. I kept checking my mirrors, but there was still nothing behind me. No trucks, no cars, nothing. 15 minutes later, I saw headlights in my rearview mirror. Finally, another vehicle. It was a truck moving fast, closing the distance between us. I felt a little relieved, thinking maybe this was the guy on the radio. But as the truck got closer, I noticed it wasn't slowing down. It came right up behind me, maybe 10 feet from my rear doors, and stayed there. I could see the outline of a semi, dark colored, no running lights except the headlights. I tapped my brakes lightly, hoping he'd back off. He didn't. He stayed glued to my bumper. My CB crackled again, the same voice. "You see me now, don't you?" My heart was pounding. I grabbed the mic and said, "Back off, man. You're way too close." He laughed, low and slow. "I'm just keeping you company. You said you were lonely." I said, "I never said that, and I'm not lonely. Just back off." The truck behind me flashed its high beams, blinding me through the mirrors. I squinted and adjusted them, but the light was overwhelming. Then the voice said, "What if I don't want to?" I hit the gas, pushing my rig up to 75. The truck behind me matched my speed, staying right on my tail. I checked the GPS. The next exit was 12 miles away. I decided to take it, get off the highway, and figure out what the hell was going on. My hands were shaking now. I dealt with aggressive drivers before, tailgaters and road ragers, but this felt different. This felt personal. The voice came back on the CB. "Where you going, Blue Kenworth? You can't outrun me." I shouted into the mic, "What do you want?" No response, just the static and the sound of his engine roaring behind me. I kept the pedal down, watching the mile markers tick by. 9 miles to the exit. 8, 7. Then the truck behind me swerved into the left lane, pulling up beside me. I glanced over, trying to see the driver. The cab was dark, no interior lights, no face visible, just a shadow behind the wheel. The truck kept pace with me, door to door, for what felt like forever. Then the CB crackled again. "You scared yet?" I didn't answer. My mouth was dry, my heart racing. The truck beside me suddenly jerked toward my lane like he was trying to sideswipe me. I yanked the wheel to the right, my tires hitting the rumble strip on the shoulder. The load shifted slightly, and I fought to keep control. The other truck pulled back into his lane, and the voice laughed again. "Careful now, don't want to roll that thing." I saw the exit sign ahead, 1 mile. I didn't signal, didn't give him any warning. At the last second, I hit the brakes and cut across the lane onto the exit ramp. The other truck flew past me on the highway, his brake lights flashing red as he tried to slow down. But he missed the exit. I watched in my mirror as his taillights disappeared into the darkness ahead. I was shaking so hard I could barely hold the wheel. I pulled into a gas station at the bottom of the ramp, a small Sinclair with 2 pumps and a tiny convenience store. The parking lot was empty except for one car. I parked my rig in the far corner, away from the lights, and killed the engine. I sat there in the dark, trying to catch my breath. My phone said it was 10:45. I called dispatch, but it went straight to voicemail. I left a message, told them what happened, and said I was taking a break. I didn't get out of the cab. I just sat there watching the road, waiting to see if the other truck would double back. 20 minutes passed, nothing. I turned the CB back on just to listen. Static. Then faint and far away, I heard the voice again. "See you next time, Blue Kenworth." I ripped the CB mic off the dashboard and threw it onto the passenger seat. I was done. I wasn't getting back on 87 tonight. I pulled out my phone and found a motel 6 miles east, just off a smaller state highway. I started the engine and drove there, checking my mirrors every 5 seconds. The motel was cheap and quiet, a 2-story building with a gravel parking lot. I booked a room for the night, $39, and backed my rig into a spot where I could see it from the window. I didn't sleep much. Every time a car drove by, I sat up and looked outside. The next morning, I called dispatch again. This time they answered. I told them everything: the CB conversation, the tailgating, the near sideswipe. The dispatcher, a woman named Carol, listened quietly. When I finished, she said, "Did you get a plate number?" I said no, it was too dark and the truck didn't have any company markings I could see. She said, "Well, file a report with the highway patrol if you want, but without a plate or a description, there's not much they can do." I asked if anyone else had reported something similar on that route. She said she'd check and get back to me. I hung up feeling frustrated and scared. I grabbed breakfast at a diner next to the motel, eggs and toast, but I barely ate. I kept thinking about the voice, the way he knew my truck, the way he laughed. I got back on the road around 10, taking a different route north through smaller highways. I avoided 87 completely. It added 2 hours to my trip, but I didn't care. I delivered the load in Billings that evening without any issues. The client signed off. I unhooked the trailer and I called it a day. That night, I stayed in a truck stop outside Billings, surrounded by other rigs and drivers. I felt safer there with people around. I asked a few guys in the lounge if they'd ever had trouble on 87. One older driver, probably in his 60s, nodded slowly. He said, "Yeah, I've heard stories. Guys getting followed, weird calls on the CB. Some say it's just bored locals messing with truckers. Others think it's something else." I asked what he meant. He shrugged. "Don't know, but I don't drive that stretch at night anymore." Carol called me back 2 days later. She said no other drivers had reported anything recently, but a few years ago there were similar complaints. A trucker claimed someone followed him for over 50 miles on 87, matching his every move, calling him on the CB. The guy filed a police report, but nothing came of it. Carol said, "Just be careful out there. If it happens again, call 911 right away." I thanked her and hung up. I haven't driven 87 at night since. I take the long way now, even if it costs me time and fuel. I also keep my CB off unless I absolutely need it. I don't want to hear that voice again. I don't want to see those headlights in my mirror. Some people say it was probably just a psycho with too much time on his hands, someone who gets a thrill scaring truckers. Maybe that's true. But the way he knew my truck, the way he stayed right on me, the way he laughed, it didn't feel random. It felt like he was hunting me. I still think about it sometimes, late at night when I'm driving through empty stretches of highway. I wonder if he's out there, waiting for another blue Kenworth to come along. I wonder if he's done this to others. And I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't taken that exit. Would he have forced me off the road? Would he have followed me all the way to Billings? I'll never know, and honestly, I don't want to. What I do know is this: the road can be a strange and dangerous place. Most of the time, it's just you, the truck, and the miles ahead. But every now and then you cross paths with something or someone that reminds you how vulnerable you really are out there. I survived that night. I made it to safety. But the fear hasn't left me. It probably never will. And that voice, low and calm, saying, "See you next time," still echoes in my head. I just hope there never is a next time. I'm 22 now, but this all happened when I was 20, right after my divorce. I moved to a small town in rural Missouri in early spring of last year, hoping for a quieter life after a long and messy separation. I found a tiny house to rent on the outskirts of town, cheap and simple. The neighbors seemed friendly enough at first. There was an older woman named Mrs. Carlisle who lived 3 houses down from me. She showed up at my door on the very first day with a homemade pie, smiling warmly and welcoming me to the neighborhood. I thought it was just normal small-town hospitality. I had no idea it was the beginning of something that would force me to leave within 6 months. First week, Mrs. Carlisle visited me 3 separate times. The first visit was the pie. The second time, she brought flowers from her garden and asked about my job. I told her I was working remotely for a marketing firm, nothing too exciting. She smiled and nodded, but her questions felt a little too personal. The third time, she showed up unannounced while I was still unpacking boxes in the garage. She walked right up to me and asked why I got divorced. I froze for a second, caught off guard. I gave her a vague answer, something like, "It just didn't work out," but she kept pressing. "Was he violent? Did he cheat? Are you seeing someone new?" I laughed it off awkwardly and changed the subject, but I felt uncomfortable. I figured she was just lonely and curious, maybe didn't have many people to talk to. The other neighbors were friendly when I saw them, but none of them ever stayed long when we talked. Looking back, I think they knew something I didn't. By the second week, Mrs. Carlisle started showing up at strange hours. 7 in the morning before I'd even had coffee. 9 at night when I was getting ready for bed. One evening, I didn't answer the door because I was on a work call. I looked out the window and saw her standing on my porch, peering through the glass for nearly 10 minutes. She didn't knock again. She just stood there looking in. That was when I started feeling genuinely uneasy. Then I started seeing her everywhere I went. At the local grocery store, she'd appear in the same aisle as me, smiling and asking what I was buying. At the post office, she'd be standing right behind me in line, saying, "What a coincidence running into you here." At the small coffee shop downtown, she'd sit at the table next to mine and just watch me for 30 minutes straight without ordering anything. I tried changing my routine. I went to the grocery store at 6 in the morning instead of my usual 3 in the afternoon. She was still there, standing near my car when I came out. I asked a younger neighbor about Mrs. Carlisle one afternoon, trying to sound casual. The woman went quiet for a moment, then said, "She's been here a long time," and quickly found a reason to leave. I got the sense that there was something everyone knew but nobody wanted to say. I started varying where I went and when. But no matter what I did, Mrs. Carlisle was always there. One morning, I found a basket of cookies sitting on my front porch. No note, but I knew they were from her. The next day, there was a large bouquet of flowers on my doorstep. The day after that, a handwritten letter, 3 pages long, telling me how she understood that I was lonely and that she could be the mother figure I needed. I had never told her about my mother, who passed away when I was 16. I started asking people in town about Mrs. Carlyle more directly. The woman at the coffee shop avoided eye contact and said, "Just don't pay her too much attention." The cashier at the grocery store leaned in and whispered, "You should be careful," but wouldn't explain further. I tried calling my landlord, the man who rented me the house, but he never answered. One night around 2 in the morning, I heard a noise on the front porch. I went to check and found a brand new wooden rocking chair sitting there, wrapped with a ribbon. There was a note attached that read, "So you can rest comfortably." See, I had never mentioned wanting a chair. I started locking every door and window obsessively before bed. That's when things got worse. I began seeing a shadow pass by the windows outside my house late at night, around 10 or 11. Every time I looked closely, no one was there, but the feeling of being watched was undeniable. One night, I woke up around 3 in the morning because I heard something in the kitchen. I crept downstairs and found the refrigerator door open and a glass of milk sitting on the table. I don't drink milk before bed, ever. The back door was unlocked, even though I was certain I had locked it. The next morning, I noticed that things in my house had been moved. A picture frame on the shelf was turned to face the other direction. A jacket I'd left on the chair was now hanging neatly on the coat hook. The book I was reading had been moved to the coffee table, and the bookmark was on a different page. I couldn't sleep after that. I started checking the locks multiple times every night, sometimes 5 or 6 times before I could even try to rest. I ordered a cheap security camera from Amazon and set it up by the front door. The next day, I checked the footage. At 3:17 in the morning, there was a shadowy figure walking past the camera, but the image was too blurry to make out who it was. I called the local police. They came, took a report, but the officer said, "There's no sign of forced entry. Maybe you just forgot to lock the door." I could tell he didn't fully believe me. I decided I needed to get out of town for a bit, so I drove to a larger city about 45 minutes away to clear my head. On the way back, I noticed a gray pickup truck that stayed 3 or 4 cars behind me the entire time. I switched lanes. It switched lanes. I turned onto a side road to test it. The truck followed. My heart was pounding as I drove back into town. The truck stayed close until I reached the main road, then it disappeared. When I got home, there was a package waiting on my doorstep. Inside was a wool sweater my size that I had never seen before. There was another note. "It's getting cold. You need to stay warm." See, that was it. I decided I had to move. I called 2 other rental listings in town. Both of them told me they were full, even though their websites still showed available units. I asked a woman I'd met at the coffee shop if she knew of anywhere else I could rent. She hesitated, then asked, "Where are you living now?" When I gave her my address, she went silent. Then she said, "Oh, that house." I asked her what she meant. She just said, "The person before you moved out early too," and wouldn't explain further. That's when I understood. There was something about that house, or about Mrs. Carlyle, that everyone in town knew but refused to talk about. That night, I couldn't sleep. I woke up at 1:30 in the morning to the sound of footsteps downstairs. This time it was clear. Footsteps, cabinets opening. I lay in bed, frozen, gripping my phone, ready to dial 911. Then I heard the footsteps coming up the stairs, slow and steady. I had locked my bedroom door from the inside. The footsteps stopped right outside my door. Then there was a soft knock. "Sweetheart, open the door. I know you're not sleeping." It was Mrs. Carlyle's voice. I didn't answer. I was shaking as I dialed 911. She kept talking through the door. "You don't need to be afraid of me. I just want to take care of you. You're so lonely, aren't you?" The police arrived 12 minutes later, but it felt like an hour. When they got there, Mrs. Carlyle was sitting on my couch downstairs, calmly drinking tea. She told the officers, "I have a key from the previous landlord. He gave it to me to check on the house when no one was renting it. I was just making sure this young lady was okay." The officer asked me if I wanted her to leave. I said yes, but she just smiled softly, no guilt, no shame. As she left, she said, "I'll be right here if you need anything, dear." The officer suggested I change the locks, but I knew that wouldn't be enough. The next morning, I packed everything I could fit into my car and left. I stayed with a friend in a town 60 miles away. I finally got a hold of my landlord after calling him a dozen times. He told me he had never given Mrs. Carlyle a key. But when I asked him about the tenant before me, he went quiet and said, "They left early too." I did some searching online and found posts on a local forum about Mrs. Carlyle. Turns out she had done the same thing to at least 4 other renters over the past 5 years. All of them were women living alone. All of them moved out within 6 months. No one ever pressed charges because there was never enough concrete evidence. People in town knew but didn't say anything because Mrs. Carlyle's family had been there for generations. 2 months later, I'm settled in a new place, but I still check my locks multiple times every night. I still jump when there's an unexpected knock at the door. I still can't drink tea without thinking about her sitting on my couch. Recently, I had to drive back to Missouri for work. I passed through that town and my heart started racing. I saw the house I used to rent. There was a new car parked in the driveway. Someone had moved in. I wondered if they knew. I wondered if Mrs. Carlyle had already started again. And I wondered if next time I'd have the courage to warn them. Or if I'd stay silent, just like everyone in that town did with me. I moved to a small town in Vermont called Fairhaven early last fall, right after I graduated from college with a photography degree. I was 24 years old and desperate for a fresh start. The city life never really suited me, and when I landed a freelance gig shooting promotional content for a few tourism companies up north, I figured it was the perfect excuse to get out. Fairhaven seemed ideal. Cheap rent, beautiful scenery, and the kind of quiet I thought I needed to focus on my work. I found a listing online for an old 2-story house on Maple Street. The landlord, an older woman named Mrs. Patterson, said it had been in her family for decades. The rent was almost too good to be true, but she explained that not many people wanted to live that far out. The house had good bones, she said, Victorian style with tall ceilings and original hardwood floors. There was even a basement I could use for storage or whatever I needed. I signed the lease without thinking twice. I moved in on a Saturday, excited about finally having my own place and the chance to set up a darkroom in the basement for my film photography. The first weekend after settling in, I decided to tackle the basement. I wanted to convert it into a darkroom where I could develop film and work on prints. It was one of those old-fashioned basements with a low ceiling, concrete floors, and that damp, musty smell that never really goes away. I spent most of Saturday morning hauling boxes of old junk up the stairs, stuff the previous tenants or maybe even Mrs. Patterson's family had left behind. There were broken lamps, stacks of newspapers from the 90s, and random pieces of furniture covered in dust. By the afternoon, I was working on clearing out the far corner when I noticed something odd. There was a wooden panel against the wall, about 3 feet wide and 4 feet tall, held in place with rusty nails. It looked like it had been there forever, but something about it seemed deliberate, like someone had put it there to hide something. I grabbed a hammer from my toolbox and started prying the nails loose. The wood was old and brittle, so it came away easier than I expected. Behind it was a small hollow space carved into the wall, just big enough to fit a couple of boxes. Inside that space was a black plastic trash bag, tied shut with a piece of old rope. My heart started beating a little faster as I untied it. Inside were personal belongings. A brown leather wallet, a women's Timex watch with a cracked face, and 4 or 5 faded Polaroid photos. One of the photos showed a young woman with blonde hair standing in front of this very house. She was smiling, wearing a green sweater and looked about 20 years old. I opened the wallet and found a Vermont driver's license. The name read Rebecca Hayes, born in 1998. I stared at the photo on the license. It was the same girl from the Polaroid. I had no idea who she was or why her things were hidden in the wall, but the whole situation felt wrong. I sat there on the cold basement floor for a long time, trying to decide what to do. The next morning, I called Mrs. Patterson. I kept my tone casual and asked if she knew anyone named Rebecca Hayes. There was a long pause on the other end of the line before she said, "No, I don't think so. Why do you ask?" I explained that I found some personal items in the basement and thought maybe someone had left them behind. She sounded genuinely confused and told me she had no idea who that could be. After I hung up, I decided to do some digging on my own. I searched Rebecca Hayes in Fairhaven, Vermont online, but nothing useful came up. Just a few social media profiles that didn't match the age or photo. Frustrated, I decided to go to the town hall and see if anyone there could help. The building was an old red brick structure in the center of town with a Vermont flag hanging out front. Inside, I was directed to the mayor's office. Mayor Thompson was a man in his early 50s with graying hair, wire-rimmed glasses, and a gray suit that looked freshly pressed. He greeted me warmly and asked how I was settling into town. I explained why I was there and showed him the wallet and one of the photos. His expression changed slightly when he looked at the picture, just a brief flicker of something, surprise maybe or recognition, but he recovered quickly. He smiled and said, "Fairhaven's a small town, but a lot of young people come and go. She probably moved away and forgot about her things. It happens more than you'd think." I asked if he could check any records or missing persons reports, but he waved it off. "I'll look into it," he said, "but I wouldn't worry too much. People lose things all the time." Something about the way he said it made me uneasy, like he was trying too hard to downplay it. I thanked him and left, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't telling me everything. 2 days later, I got a text from an unknown number. It was short and direct. "Stop asking questions. Leave it alone." I stared at my phone, my stomach twisting. I hadn't given my number to anyone in town except Mrs. Patterson and a guy at the hardware store. Whoever sent this knew what I was doing. That night, I was working in my makeshift office upstairs when I heard a noise from the basement. It was faint, like something scraping against concrete. I grabbed a flashlight and went down to check. The wooden panel I'd removed was back in place, nailed shut just like it had been before. I know for a fact I didn't do that. I would never have put it back. My hands were shaking as I pried the nails loose again. The hollow space behind it was empty. The black trash bag and everything inside it were gone. Someone had been in my house. I immediately called the police. Officer Davis showed up about 20 minutes later. He was younger than I expected, maybe 30, with short hair and a crisp uniform. I told him everything, the hidden items, the text message, the missing bag. He listened and took notes, but I could tell he wasn't taking it seriously. "Could Mrs. Patterson have come by?" he asked. "Maybe she had a spare key and wanted to retrieve something." I shook my head. She lived 2 towns over and had never mentioned coming back. He looked around the basement, checked the locks on the doors, and found no sign of forced entry. "I'll file a report," he said, "but without evidence of a break-in, there's not much I can do. Keep your doors locked and call us if anything else happens." After he left, I sat on the couch and tried to process what was going on. Someone had a key to my house. Someone who didn't want me digging into Rebecca Hayes. I couldn't let it go. The next day, I called my older sister, Emma. She's a journalist for the Boston Globe, specializing in investigative crime stories. I told her everything and she said she'd help. A few hours later, she called me back. "I found something," she said. There was a missing persons case in Fairhaven back in 2019. A 21-year-old woman named Rebecca Hayes was reported missing by her roommate. The local police investigated but concluded she likely left town on her own. Her family disagreed, but there wasn't enough evidence to pursue it further. My chest tightened. "So she's been missing for 5 years." "Officially, yes," Emma said. "But the case went cold. No one's looked into it since." She told me she'd drive up that weekend to help me investigate in person. In the meantime, I started noticing things. A gray GMC pickup truck parked on my street, always a few houses down, never with anyone inside. One afternoon, I saw Mayor Thompson at the Fairhaven General Store. We made eye contact across the aisle, and he quickly turned and walked away. I felt like I was being watched constantly. I started checking my locks 3 or 4 times a night and barely slept. Emma arrived on Saturday afternoon. She brought her laptop, a voice recorder, and a camera. Together, we drove to the Maple Street Diner, the place where Rebecca had worked part-time according to the old news article Emma found. Inside, we met Linda, a waitress in her early 60s with silver hair and a kind face. When we mentioned Rebecca's name, her expression softened. "I remember her," Linda said quietly. "Sweet girl, hardworking. She was here almost every shift." Emma asked if Rebecca had seemed upset or scared before she disappeared. Linda hesitated, then leaned in closer. "She was scared of someone," Linda said. "She wouldn't say who, but I could tell. A few days before she went missing, she told me something strange. She said, if anything happens to me, check the old house on Maple Street. I didn't think much of it at the time, but after she disappeared, I mentioned it to the police. They didn't follow up." Emma and I exchanged a look. "That was my house." Linda added, "This town has secrets. Some people here have power and they don't like it when people ask too many questions." We thanked her and left. Back at the house, Emma and I went down to the basement with high-powered flashlights. We searched every corner, every crack in the walls. Near the hollow space where I'd found the bag, Emma noticed something wedged into a narrow gap between the concrete and the wooden frame. It was a small piece of lined paper, folded several times. She carefully pulled it out and unfolded it. The handwriting was shaky, written in blue ink. It read, "He knows I can't leave, help me. RH." We both went silent. Emma took a photo of the note with her phone. "We need to take this to the state police," she said. "Tomorrow morning, first thing." That night around 10 o'clock, there was a loud knock at the front door. I looked through the window and saw Mayor Thompson standing on the porch. He wasn't alone. Officer Davis was with him. I opened the door slowly, and the mayor's friendly demeanor from before was gone. His face was stern, almost angry. "I heard you've been asking around about Rebecca Hayes," he said. "I need to talk to you both." Emma stepped forward. "What happened to her?" she asked directly. The mayor was silent for a moment, then said, "That's not something you want to get involved in." Officer Davis added, "For your own safety, drop this. Leave town." Emma didn't back down. "We're going to the state police tomorrow. This story is going to get out." Mayor Thompson's expression hardened. "You don't understand this town. Some things are better left buried." As he said it, Officer Davis rested his hand on his holstered gun. It wasn't a direct threat, but the message was clear. The tension in the room was suffocating. I felt my heart pounding in my chest. Emma stayed calm. "We're leaving first thing tomorrow morning," she said, "but this story will get out." The mayor stared at her for a long moment, then nodded. "Smart choice," he said. Then he and Davis turned and left. I locked the door behind them and leaned against it, trying to catch my breath. Emma and I didn't sleep that night. We packed our things, sent all the photos and information to the state police via email, and called their emergency line to report what had happened. We spoke to a Sergeant Miller who said he'd look into it immediately. At 6 in the morning, we loaded everything into Emma's car. As we were about to leave, I noticed the gray pickup truck blocking the end of the driveway. A tall man in a black jacket got out and just stood there, staring at us. He didn't say a word. Emma didn't hesitate. She threw the car into reverse, drove across the lawn and around the side of the house, and we took a back route through the grass to reach County Road 7. As we pulled onto the main road, I looked back and saw two dark sedans pulling up to the house. My stomach dropped. We drove fast, constantly checking the mirrors, but no one followed us onto the highway. We made it to the state police barracks in the next town over about 30 minutes later. Sergeant Miller met us in person. He was in his mid-40s, serious, and took detailed notes as we explained everything. He assured us the case would be reopened and warned me not to return to Fairhaven for the time being. I told him I had no intention of going back. I lost my security deposit and moved into a small studio apartment in Burlington. A few weeks later, Emma called me with an update. The state police had searched the area around the Maple Street house and the woods behind it. They found human remains buried about 200 yards into the tree line. DNA testing confirmed it was Rebecca Hayes. The investigation was ongoing, and Mayor Thompson, along with several others, had been brought in for questioning. I don't know if they'll ever be charged, but at least Rebecca's family finally has some answers. I still live in Burlington now, working freelance from my apartment. I don't go to small towns anymore, and I definitely don't trust people in power the way I used to. Sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night thinking about that note. He knows. I can't leave. Help me. I'm glad we helped her, even if it was too late. But I'll never forget the fear I felt in that house, or the way an entire town tried to keep a girl's death buried. Some places carry too many dark secrets, and sometimes it's better not to dig too deep. But when you do, you have to be ready to face whatever you find.